I'm an embryologist, and so what I'm trying to do is understand why babies are born with heart defects. So this is called congenital heart disease, and it's the most common form of birth defect. It makes up a third of all birth defects, and it affects 1 per 100 babies born in Australia and in all other countries in the world. So in an average week in Australia, 42 babies are born with a heart defect, 30 will have a life-saving operation, and 4 little lives will be lost in that week. And for the most severe cases, these babies are having surgery within a day of birth. Their heart is the size of a walnut, and this heart has to be remoulded back into the sort of proper structure that it should be. For those with the most complex heart defects, they have to have open heart surgery 3 times before they even reach kindergarten. So it takes an incredible personal toll on families. And again, thinking back on medical budgets, it's huge. So what's amazing for a birth defect that is so common is that we don't know what causes it in 80% of cases. So my research is involved in trying to understand which genes or which gene is mutated in a child with a defect, so that we can tell the parents why it happened, why that child was born with a defect. We can answer the question of whether it will happen to their next child, will it be born with a defect? And in time, if we understand the gene mutation, we can also work at better prognosis and better treatment for these children. We do a lot of work at the Victor Chang Institute because heart disease is not just one sort of disease. There are many different types. I've just told you about congenital heart disease. There are diseases associated with the blood vessels of the heart, and so you can get a blockage and a heart attack. There are diseases associated with the electrical circuitry of the heart that keeps it pumping in a rhythmic way, and many people get arrhythmias which interfere with that. There are people who have diseases of the heart muscle, so that the pump just doesn't have the ability to pump reliably. So at the Institute we work on many different types of heart disease. One of the greatest breakthroughs for us recently, for the Victor Chang Cardiac Research Institute and St Vincent's Hospital, is being able to bring hearts that have stopped beating back to life. Now these hearts are hearts that have come from people who have donated their heart, their organ, to someone for a transplant to have their life saved. And so what's happened in the past is if the donor's heart has stopped beating, it's not used. It's only hearts that have remained beating that have been used for heart transplants. So very recently, Professor Peter MacDonald and Kumar Dittal came up with a method of keeping the heart beating and checking the health of that heart while it's being transported, sometimes for hours, from donor to recipient, and then transplanting it into patients. And so this has happened a number of times now. It was an absolute world first. People are alive today who definitely wouldn't have been if this research hadn't been done. And now this procedure is being copied around the world, and they've successfully copied it in England a couple of times, and they've saved some lives there. So this has the possibility of making about 30% more hearts available for transplantation. So this is having a very immediate and very important effect on those who are suffering from heart disease. Professor Peter MacDonald has been working on this project generally for about 15 years. Okay? And he has been, initially before this, when one could only take hearts that were still beating, those hearts were taken, they were put into a cold solution, they actually stopped beating and they were transported, and they could only be out of a body for 4 hours. And it took about 10 years of research to work out how best to actually transport that heart so that when it went in to the recipient, it was in the best quality it could be, so the person had the best chance of survival. So that was about a 10-year piece of work. This latest breakthrough actually came relatively quickly, but it was built up on all that previous knowledge and understanding. And here it was a case of saying, well, we're throwing away these hearts that have stopped beating. What a waste when so many people are waiting on waiting lists for heart transplants. So let's do something a bit daring. Let's see if we can actually reanimate them, get them beating again, make sure that they are functioning well, and you can because they're on a piece of equipment that keeps them beating and operating well, and then transplant them into people who would have not got a heart otherwise. So, call it 15 years, and many, many people working on that project. But we're so proud of this work because it's having immediate and huge effects on people's lives. Look, you know, scientists train and medical doctors train for so many years. They get a basic degree, then they do a research degree to get a PhD, and still not that, you know, they're still not specialised enough to do certain research. So then there's more training on top of that. So it takes a long time to train people like myself and all these fabulous young people who are wanting to come into this industry and to stay in the industry, to be very trained in a very narrow area, but we need to narrow down so that we can do the best job. So that's really hard to keep this sort of conveyor belt of expertise moving along if your funding's popping in and out, and we're on, you know, 3-year funding cycles, and you know, the success rate from the NH and MRC, the National Health and Medical Research Council, has dropped from 25% down to 10% at the predictions for this year over the last 5 years. So jobs are being lost all the time, and you can't just pick up that piece of research 3 years later when you get the funding. It just doesn't work like that, and that person who lost their job is not just going to come back and then offer their expertise again. They're off somewhere else, you know, hopefully working and contributing in other ways. So you've just got to have sustained funding. You've got to know that if I start something risky but important now, that I'm going to be able to continue with it, because if you pull the plug on the funding, well, then there goes all that expertise. There goes the discoveries you've made to that point. It's just such a waste. Yes, well, I think I was born to be a scientist. It's the only thing I really loved other than sport at school. And so I knew from a very early age I wanted to be a scientist. I knew from a little bit later on that I wanted to do medical research. I'm not sure I really knew what medical research was about, but it's about discovery, you know, discovering what's known, but at the same time making a contribution to society. I've got the best job in the world. I love what I do. You do an experiment, you get an answer, and you know, you and your lab mates are the only people in the entire world at that time to know something about the world. I mean, there's a huge buzz in that. So it's the best job in the world, but what's so wonderful is that we're making a contribution to society. And we're making that contribution so that we can one day help others and help ourselves and help our own families as well. But it's a fantastic area to be in, and it's wonderful to have the opportunity to make a contribution. And I just wish there was more money for research, not just medical research, but all research, so that more people could make contributions to society.